This week's episode has two segments. The first is an interview with Mikaela Sims, the storyteller for the As Above, So Below actual play, which I think is trying to do some interesting things for the world of darkness in terms of actual plays. After that, at about the 16-minute and 15-second mark, Josh Heath and I do a year-end Q&A for the rest of the episode. On with the show. Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast, and my guest today is Mikaela Sims, who is running a widely regarded and well-regarded actual play of Mage the Ascension on Twitch. Mikaela, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
So what got you into Mage the Ascension, and what made you decide to run an actual play of it?
That's a long story, so I'm guessing you want the short version.
I mean, I will take the up to the medium version of it. Like if you have this is the first time I saw the purple cover in the distance at a game store or something like that.
The game store was mine. I owned a game store with a few other folks back in Maryland in the mid-90s. We ran demos. At the time, I was doing some contract work for TSR and then Wizards of the Coast. And we were kind of cycling through some of the World of Darkness at the time because we had an area in the back that people could play. And so I started with Vampire, and then it was probably 97 that I think I played Mage for the first time. And then I got another boost in the late 90s, early 2000s when I ran a World of Darkness website that turns out that a lot of the White Wolfers had played on, unbeknownst to me at the time, because we had separate storytellers. We had actually had an integrated database for the characters that followed all the rules, and an integrated with DigiChat. And I ran, in addition to all the coding on the site, I ran Mage.
Interesting. What was the name of the site, if you're comfortable
sharing? Back then it went from nightcraft.com to emeraldchronicles.com, and I closed it in 2003.
Okay. Every once in a while, we have people in the Discord who are like, I played Mage for 214 years on New Bremen. And I'm like, okay. So I guess I didn't formally really start running that much Mage until M20. So everything before then feels like, Papa, tell us of the before times when you played on the internet.
Yeah, we actually had Jess Hennig and Jason Carl had played on the site. So I knew about Jess back then. I found out about Jason just a couple of years ago.
Oh, neat. And now you are running this actual play. What is it, and why are you choosing to do that now?
The goal is it's going to be a 7-part game, and it's going to be, I'm seeing the word convergence is a type of game that it may be described as, but it's a convergence of 3 episodes of the technocracy and 3 episodes of traditions. And then if we get it there, it would be a grand finale with everyone. And I've filmed 2 episodes of each. We would still do one more plus the finale if we finish.
What drew you to Mage to do an actual play? Is there something about the game or the system or the community that you find particularly enjoyable?
It was always my favorite game in the World of Darkness. It was something that I went to predominantly after I'd left D&D back during 2nd edition. It's always been probably my favorite RPG. As far as kind of what led to this game, was a couple of things. But one was there was a conversation that Dan Dillon was part of last year or on Twitter. That got my gears turning because Justice Armand was involved in the conversation. And for anyone who knows, he and I, we worked at Beetle and Grimm's. He still does. And we have a friendly nemesis relationship. So I thought it would be fun to run a technocracy game. And then a bunch of my other friends started saying, I want to play too. And then that got quickly out of hand. So that's when I came up with the concept of the 2 competing storylines so that my different friends could all play at the same time.
And this is the game contemporary? Are there any modifications you're making to the setting, or is it just kind of somewhat contemporary M20-ish?
It's a contemporary Los Angeles area, specifically the Valley, Burbank. It is primarily based on Mage 20. We have taken some liberties with Satyr. Phil Bricotto had written a book that he put on the Storyteller's Vault, that like Mage Made Easy or something like that. And in that, he strips down some of the concepts to make it easier for new players. And that was kind of the way I approached the players who, like Critical Bard, who may have played Vampire, but had never played Mage and was more familiar with D&D. It was really about making them able to move into it and just have fun with it.
So it more or less takes the M20 system and maybe strips out or streamlines a few things, as opposed to being like, oh, we're doing a V5 hack, or we're doing this in X20
Correct.
modern. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I strip from, but I don't add to. The most that I considered And we had accessible during the recording. It was 20 years ago. I'd written code to allow the difficulty of a spell to be calculated. And it would also output how much paradox you would get. So even if you didn't know the book rules, if you could check the boxes, you knew what you were getting. And I've got it running on my NAS. It's not anywhere public, but that was something that I updated the code to run for Mage 20, and we had available to us.
Is that something that you wish the community had better access to writ large, just kind of tools to simplify the playing of the game to new players?
I think for Mage, there is more difficulty unwrapping people's heads around paradigm being the limiting factor, more so than knowing, is the difficulty going to be a 7 or an 8?
And so you mentioned this is in contemporary Los Angeles. What does your world of darkness look like? Is it, are there a lot of supernatural creatures? Is it largely mundane? Is the place overrun with mages? Are they some of the only ones that are active in the area? Kind of, what does the world of darkness in something like the second decade of the 21st century look like to you?
Probably not too different than what a lot of the other actual plays do. I'm assuming everything is here to a point. I was never too involved with Hunter or Demon. I was more involved with the primary 5. In fact, in our second episode, the tradition mages meet a Sluagh and communicate with some wraiths that I actually use some special effects to kind of affect. There are no vampires or werewolves forecast to be in the game, but I would have no reason that if for some reason that they needed to come up, they could.
How dark do you consider it to be? Like, some people consider Mage to be fundamentally a game about horror, where other people just kind of consider it closer to urban fantasy. Do you have any theme or mood that you feel that the play shoots for?
I think that's going to vary by the story. This game is going to get potentially into some dark places. And it's because the themes that I'm playing with, whether you can tell by the graphic that I used, or if you've actually paid attention and watched the first episode or two, you know that there's a nightclub involved that plays on themes of heaven and hell. And so these moralistic dichotomy of good and evil, especially since I've got a traditions group and a technocracy group, which are traditionally antagonists, I've got to play with what their expectations are of what's good and what's not. And in an episode that I haven't aired yet, B. Dave, who's playing a technocrat, and Dan Dillon, who's also with that group, they are actually wondering whether they should proceed with something that would be a crime against reality, but is a good thing. And they have to come to terms with that. And what do they do? And what do they not do? So at a superficial level, there's those kinds of things. But as I get closer to the finale, I'm going to be playing with what is a fundamental evil. And whether that's Nefandi or something else, those all kind of stack up, and that can make the setting darker or lighter.
Do you have a snapshot of who some of the participants and who their characters are? So people often like to glom onto a particular person being like, ooh, I'm curious to see how this witch is portrayed, or this technomancer, or what have you. Who is your cast?
Oh, great. So on the technocracy side, we have B. Dave Walters, who is playing the professor. I have Nora Ibrahim, who is playing Agent Nightshade, and she's a New World Order agent. B. Dave, by the way, is playing a progenitor construct. Dan Dillon and Justice, who is from Wizards of the Coast, he's actually playing a void engineer of one type. And we've got Justice Armon from Beetle and Grimm's, who is playing a void engineer who is somewhere as a cross between Constantine and Batman or something, but he's very gadget based, something of a Ghostbuster, but more of an investigator. On the tradition side, we've got Chronicle Builder, who's playing a chorister. We've got Latia Jaquise of Money Cook Games. She's playing a Cult of Ecstasy. I have Jen Kretschmer, who's playing an orphan. Her character is like a cross between a void engineer and a dream speaker who deals with slipping into liminal spaces and is a sleep researcher. And then it's kind of like a special guest player. I've got Satyr Phil Bricado, who's also playing a Cult of Ecstasy.
So two of those people are essentially playing themselves. That's good to know, because I would argue that B. Dave Walters is a progenitor construct if I were to have met one.
He is.
Yeah.
And then I've got some guests that pop in too for some of the meta plot elements. One of the things that I'm doing different is I'm using B-roll and special effects and cutaways like you would on a TV show.
What is B-roll, just to explain that?
Video that is not filmed at the time of the actual play, or in the case of like a TV show, it would be that cutaway when you see a bit of the setting between scenes and those kinds of things. So I've got like a fake newscast where Josh Simons comes in and pretends to be a newscaster. And That's one way that I can do an info dump to the viewers. The players didn't have access to those things. So this is just as much of a handout for them while they're watching as it is for the viewers. I've got Adam Bradford, who does a little cameo in the second two episodes. Whether we get to it or not, Matt Mercer actually filmed one for third Technocracy episode.
So this is kind of a cut above in terms of the amount of effort and technical prowess that a lot of actual plays do. What do you think the World of Darkness actual play community should kind of look to if they do want to up their game? It seems like Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder in general have been one or two steps ahead in terms of a lot of those considerations to make something a more pleasurable viewing experience. It feels like your actual play has kind of set a benchmark or up that level. Where do you think other World of Darkness actual play should be if their goal is to have an expansive audience that kind of delivers a better quality entertainment experience?
Sure. So actually, one benefit to being World of Darkness is that everything that exists in our world, you can get video clips for in a lot of ways. Websites like Motion Array or Storyblocks with a fairly nominal fee. If you wanted these kind of B-roll elements or special effects, a little bit of work with Premiere and After Effects can do it. But otherwise, yes, I think being able to use B-roll would be one way to do it. Other things that I'm doing are, if you're in a studio, it's easy because you can change the camera angles, but it's important to change visually what people are seeing on the scene so that it maintains their interest, especially when you're looking at, in our case, 2.5 hour mark. And we take an intermission when we stream. I stream for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then we pick up. And then we do commentary on Twitch. But then when I put it on VOD for YouTube, I just put the actual episode. So doing those kinds of things. And I took a lot of that by watching news, because news is the king of talking heads on screen to keep things visually interesting. So whether that's the text blurbs that I use in the top that I get a lot of good feedback on, or changing up the, is it going to be just these 4 people talking or these 2 or, me and one person, change the screens. And then that's also good for when clips and highlights are done on Twitch so that it's something different for each one. Because if it's always going to look like just the same 6 people or whatever kind of in the same boxes every time, that's not a way to differentiate the clips.
And is that a skill set you developed for this? Is this something you had previously? And kind of how much time did it take you to get there?
I do not have this skill set. I'm learning as I go. Each episode tends to be a little bit more involved from a special effects standpoint. In the first Traditions episode, which was my second one that I had edited, I did face tracking. And there's a scene where I have a ghost face for doing the Wraith. That was done with face tracking. And I did not know how to do that before I did it. The next Technocracy episode, I got a Part 107 license for my drone and went and recorded drone footage for something. And then that got used as part of my B-roll combined with special effects. And that had camera tracking in it so that I could put in police cars in the A-Team van and another little special surprise. So I'm learning as I go. We recorded in May. I probably had the bulk of the first 2 episodes done in about 2 months. And a lot of that also included building all of the core elements. So all of the lower thirds, the background, loops, all those kind of renders. And they go a lot faster now. And then it takes me about 5 days to do the captions too, because I'm doing them by hand.
How much of that is being done live, and how much of that are you putting in after the fact then?
Nothing is being done live. So in the first episode with the Technocracy, they saw a picture of the floor map. They could see the floor plan for the club. That's the only thing visually they saw. In the first Traditions game, they saw the screenshot that included the cover of the magazine and the inside of the magazine that they see that includes the magic eye on the cover. And I did the Sluagh voice in the game with my Go XLR. The Wraith voice, everything else is all done post.
What are the kind of streams you wish were available for you to watch about the World of Darkness, and Mage in particular, if you have a thought?
I would love to see a Technocracy game that didn't treat them stereotypically. I would love to see Mage games that were able to travel the kind of into the Umbra and go more with some of the supernatural aspects of the game, whether you were doing it before kind of the time of reckoning or whether the storms are gone now. But whatever, running around town and avoiding hit marks only goes but so far. And then as far as other World of Darkness games, I'd love to see Changeling the Dreaming game. Changeling was a game that I also really enjoyed, and the Slua that I portray in the second episode was actually a character of mine 20 years ago. So,
is there anything else you'd like to share about the Chronicle, the stream, the methodologies before we say, hey, how can we follow this or watch it?
Just that everyone who's been involved with this has been kind of donating their time. So a lot of these are professional streamers, especially within the D&D space. They were really kind of endeared to conceptually what I was trying to pull off with this. And so they donated their time, and I've opened up a coffee account. So if anyone would like to donate to them so that we can either finish the series, I'd love to be able to do that.
So what is the name of your stream and where can we watch it?
It's called As Above, So Below, and it's a Mage the Ascension stream. It's available on my Twitch first, and that's at Mikaela Sims on Twitch. And you can follow me on Twitter at Mikaela V Sims. And then after the fact, I post it as a VOD on YouTube under my name as well.
Awesome. And we will have links to those in the show notes. Mikaela, thank you so much for your time, as well as what you're doing for the Mage community.
Thank you so much for having me.
Gladly. A link to everything Mikaela discussed is in the show notes, more or less. And now on to the Q&A. Hi, Mage fans. These are your hosts, Terry Robinson and
Josh Heath.
And today we are doing kind of a Mage the Podcast Q&A year in review. We are covering not the books we read. I'm going to try and do that with Adam, if Adam and I can find some free time. If not, but we are just kind of talking about the show and how we have developed as gamers over the course of the year. We opened this up in the Discord community, and we got a number of what I thought were really good questions that I look forward to Josh and I tackling. First off, Josh, high level, what are some projects you did this year?
Oh, that is a great question that is hard to answer because now I have to remember all of the things that I did. So I think this year I worked on some official Mage content that is in development, I believe now, for Victorian Mage, for some of the supplementary material that will be coming out. So people should be excited about that. I produced, I think, about only 4 or 5 things for the Storyteller's Vault this year. It was a slow year for the Vault, but I did produce a couple of things for the Storypath Nexus as well, including Many Names of Freya, which came out this year. And then some first teams got released for Werewolf the Apocalypse. And I just helped release a Chronicle Builder's Guide for Vampire the Masquerade by Joe Weinberg. And most of the year has been taken up with trying to build an anthology of short fiction for Werewolf the Apocalypse, which has been hard. That has been a very hard project, and it's now officially in layout, even though I haven't started the layout process. So, and also there is a Werewolf the Apocalypse official project that I worked on for some ready-made characters that will be coming out with Apocalyptic Record or after Apocalyptic Record comes out. So
the stuff you did for Rich Bastard's Guide to Magic is now out in the world, and people can buy that. And you and I got to talk about that. You also did Werewolf the Podcast. You helped me run a small convention.
I did.
That does not feel like it happened this year.
No.
There's part of me that's like, Josh, remember when you and I were just wistful teenagers and we ran a small gaming convention online with nothing but our dreams? And someone's like, that was 7 months ago. And I'm like, lies! Entropy.
I honestly didn't remember that was this year. I thought that was last year for sure, by at least. So
you also started the Opcast.
Opcast. We're 11 episodes recorded in on that and 3 released. So we have been hustling away at talking about the Trinity Continuum, which is fantastic. Yeah, there are lots of things going on. Sorry to not know how to enumerate all of them.
That's fine. Let me be like, my name's Josh. I'm so prolific that I don't remember all the stuff I do. Part of it is the fact that there is work that you did last year or the year before that came out this year. There are projects in process. There are things that came out, and then there are things that you are planning for. You are one of the people that seemingly always has a bunch of projects at different stages, as opposed to like, I will start this today, and I will embark on a new one once it is done in its entirety.
You have to productively procrastinate, which is what I do, where I always have a thing that I can procrastinate on so that I feel like I'm being productive. What about you, Terry? What things were you involved with this year that you can talk about?
My TLDR was I went from 0 Mage credits to 5. over the course of a year. Two of those are remarkably small credits. Like someone said, hey, what do you think about this? And I identified a spelling error or something like that. They're like, okay, we're going to have you listed as additional writing provided by. Yeah, I have a very small bit for the Agent's Dossier, and I'm curious to see if that survives. If so, I'm going to be pleased because I will have added a system to Mage. That's like, if you were to come up with like an EGOT or like a triple threat for writing, I feel like coming up with systems, coming up with lore, and writing fiction is like the triple crown for a line. Like the only way you can beat that is being like a dev or a line dev or something like that. So yeah, I got to write for Victorian Mage. I got to write 2 of the traditions for Lore of the Traditions, which is utterly terrifying. And there is a Neuron dedicated to the fact that one day that manuscript preview will be up and people will have thoughts about what I wrote, and I will go from, my name is Terry, I'm an actualized human being, to be just like hiding under my bed. And it will depend on like what the ratio of lovers to haters is, and if it exceeds a certain thing, I'll be like, okay, I understand, I'm moving to Greenland. Whereas on the other side, it'll just be like, come at me, effers! One of the things I wanted to offer as a service is hire me to defend your work from people who are snarky on Kickstarter. So like James Bell and Ian A. Watson are super like, I'm sorry that you don't think this is for you. And I want to be the person that's like, bring it. Like at me. This corner, this hour. I will show you that this is an acceptable revision of Scion Hero or something like that. I would not actually do that. I don't advocate violence in that way. I did 2 Storyteller Vault publications. Strange Yesterdays, I still have no idea how that came into existence, where I'm like, I have thoughts about the revised metaplot, and then it turned out to be like 23,000 words. I'm like, how did this happen? We ran a small convention that went surprisingly well.
Yeah, it had a lot of attendees, and most of the games were filled, and people seemed happy with it.
Yeah, we had 60% of our games were at capacity, and we produced something like 600 player hours, which is only a little bit less than like what you need for Monte Cook Games to be like, we'll give your storytellers free copies of Numenera. I'll be curious to see how that goes. You and I also launched RPGnomics, so as part of Pain in the Dice, kind of my other project to cover just general game stuff. I got to wind down Systematic Understanding of Everything. I keep forgetting that entire project occurred over the course of COVID. And it's weird. We stopped producing episodes in early October and it still gets 300 listens a week.
Wow, that's really solid.
Yeah, it makes me very excited to do that project first for Mage and then probably for Storypath. I really like the Trinity system. I'm not a huge fan of the Trinity world. Scion's world is a bit more interesting to me, but I don't feel it has the same mechanical tightness. And I'm wondering if I pick one, which should it be? Because theoretically, Storypath should be Storypath, but each of those games adds so much on top that I feel like if you were to do 10 episodes on each, you'd only be sharing the first 3 between the games. But I think there is demand for that, and that seemingly is something I can do. So maybe I do. I produced 52 episodes of Maids the Podcast, plus bonus episodes, plus 11 episodes of Systematic Understanding of Everything, plus 6 episodes of Pain in the Dice. And that's all for me. Anything before we get to questions?
No, I think we should just hop into the questions at this stage.
Cool.
I will ask you this first one, Terry. Stephen Carton asks, your favorite, most interesting, not a literal book guest star for this year.
Okay.
On Mage the Podcast, I believe.
Yes.
Unless this is
yeah, well. Systematic Understanding of Everything. We're talking with Elliot was a delight. But to me, there were a pair of episodes that like really made me feel like we had a strong audience that was interested in the manifold presentation of Mage, and that was when you and I talked about Mortal Organization, which did gangbusters in terms of listening, and it was very quickly received, and people were like, do another one! And I'm like, okay, there is demand for this. So while I have no interest in being like, we're going to do a deep dive in Vampire, the stuff where we're like, well, there's all these weird bits around the World of Darkness that I want to talk about, people are interested in that. I think we did a good job of pointing it at Mage, which is always my requirement whenever I cover something that isn't obviously Mage. I want arrows pointing at the game and how you can use it. The other one was when Chaz and I did Invisible Sun, because that was just, Terry wants to talk about surrealism. Initially, we get like 600 listens, 600 to 700 listens the week, and a episode comes out, and then it gets to 1,000 within kind of a month. For that episode, it got like 300 listens, and I'm like, oh man, this is too far out there. And then I got this message from Anchor, who is the provider we use. And they're like, yeah, we tallied listeners incorrectly. And like I hit refresh and it was like 800 listens week 1. And I'm like, goal! As I'm fond of saying, thank you for everyone who went on my journey of some Invisible Sun bullshit. But the big one to me that I'm like, oh man, that was a good thing, and I'm glad it happened, was talking with Kathy Ryan on the history of Mage, partially because Kathy was pleased with how it came out, and that's always good to hear when someone is a little bit trepidatious of talking and is like, hey, I like how you made me sound. And in most cases, it's the way the person sounds, and you remove some from dirt around the edge, and that was about it. But yeah, the Kathy Ryan one was pretty great. And also talking to Greg Stolze. He was a glorious interview. That was an episode that was fun for me, where I'm just spending the whole time like, Greg Stolze. Next question.
So Stephen Carton asks, have your aspirations or hopes for M5 changed this year?
Yes. The thing that came into sharp contrast was the fact that there were still more books being done. Like Onyx Path at current, when they run a Kickstarter, their estimated delivery date is, I think, 30 months out from the end of the Kickstarter. So that means like M5 comes in mid-2024, assuming they wait until Lore of the Traditions is out. And I also would hope that like Apocalyptic Record and Beckett's Jihad Diary, there would be a book to bridge the two. And I don't even know of plans for one. So like maybe 2025 we get new Mage. A lot of people are like, okay, Werewolf's going, Mage has to be next. And then we got Wraith, and then we got Hunter, and then Werewolf got delayed. So like we've got time. But in the meantime, like I think we as a community need to come up with tools to help other community members figure out Mage and figure out the game they want to run. Because I don't feel as if Paradox is going to be helping us much in that regard. Which is fine. They're not actively getting in the way, and they owe us absolutely nothing. So I hope that is something to figure out. So I guess the biggest thing is I would not be surprised if Mage becomes kind of an antagonist book. That if we get almost a Sabbath-like book that happens to include will workers. Josh, you've been keyed into how the publication stuff for PDX has been going. Has your thoughts on what M5 could be or when it will come or what it will look like changed at all?
Yeah, it has, in that I don't think we should expect it. And I don't mean that negatively. I think we should not expect a Mage 5th edition to appear in any sort of timeline that we would have assumed based on any historical data. Paradox is producing material at a rate that makes sense for them in the way that makes sense for them business-wise and in ways that are not following any sort of systems that have been set down in the past. And for the good or the bad of that, that is the truth of it. And we will potentially see something like a Mage tie-in, I think, way before we will see anything that is a new Mage edition. The fact we're getting Hunter before we're getting Werewolf is one of those things that makes me go, see, people should not assume we're getting anything in any sort of order, because for Paradox, it just depends on how efficiently can we create this in a way that we feel like we are comfortable with it, in a way that we know the fan base will appreciate it, and we will be able to get new people involved in this property. Werewolf and Mage are difficult games in a lot of different ways to get produced in a way that will not inflame one group or another, in a way that will not build their community, which is something they want to do. When we see Mage, if we see Mage again, it will be in a form that we will be surprised by, I think, and it will be at a time we will be surprised by it.
The big thing to me has been to see how the world of Darkness has been shaping up, like what the world of V5 looks like. They really tamp down a lot of the weird, and Changeling and Mage live in that weird. So the other thing to me is a lot of people are like, oh, Satiros has to be involved. And I'm like, well, I'd like some magey person to be in it. Like Justin Achille has said before that he's not too interested in Mage, which is fine. So I'm not interested in Vampire. The fact that there has been that departure makes me more comfortable with there being an M5 that, like, in the same way that Dark Ages Fae and Changeling are theoretically the same line but are wildly different, I am more comfortable now with Mage going through that shift of having something that is almost, I don't want to say unrecognizable, but that shares very little lore and maybe only thematic ties. And along with that, it makes me more comfortable with having some fresh new writer do it. Stuart Wick wasn't that old when the first edition came out. Satiros wasn't that old when he took over. Jess Heinig wasn't that old when he took over. If there's some 28-year-old indie RPG designer that has thoughts about urban fantasy and magic and tough choices and the power of belief that has never touched a storyteller game before, and they become the dev, awesome. I would love to see that.
100%. I am comfortable with new blood
Mhm.
and new ideas being suffused in the world of darkness. And I think if done with an eye toward understanding, but not feeling beholden to what has come before, then they're going to be fine.
Yeah. No one can take our M20 from us.
Exactly.
Except for Travis. If he demanded it from me, I'd give it to him.
So Stephen Carton asks, what is your plan with the Patreon, Terry?
So I have two big plans with the Patreon. One was I can now pay an audio editor for special projects, and I have one lined up when I get to start the How to Mage series. I timed that poorly. One, there is a extra kid that my blended family is now attending to, which has been chewing up a lot of cycles, which has been very rewarding, but is expensive and time consuming. I haven't yet made time for some of those other mage projects that I would then want to pass on to other people. So apologies for not getting started on that. I have a good reason. The other big thing I want to do with it is there are Storyteller Vault supplements that I want to have exist, but I don't have the expertise or ability to write them. So like we never got a book on the Indian subcontinent in any way, shape, or form. And if I can find a writer that knows Mage and is willing to take not great money for it, but not bad money for it, I think it would be a good use of our funds. And this is something I've asked the executive producers about, to make that exist. And maybe we make our money back and maybe we don't. But to me, we now get this filled in by someone who knows the stuff, and we get hopefully another RPG writer familiar with Mage. So I feel like there's some spin-off benefit to that. And there are a few rules areas where I'd really love to hand it over to somebody who is a rules whiz with Chronicles of Darkness or Storypath, who have better understanding of how rules make setting, and setting reinforces rules. It would still be for Mage and the X20 systems, but again, someone with that rules familiarity I feel could bring a lot to the table. So I have a bunch of projects. I have two that we're kind of hashing out to see what the dollar amount would need to be, how big it would ultimately be, and how niche it would be. And hopefully we can get those going. So that's kind of the other big thing I would want to see the Patreon go for. Also, I've bought a bunch of equipment over time, and it's nice to get reimbursed for it. We've also sent, for instance, microphones to some of our recurring guests. So if you've noticed the audio quality improve for some of those interviews, that's why. And thank you so much to our supporters on Patreon for doing that. Josh, the Werewolf, the podcast has a Patreon. Your episode schedule has been, you slowed down the rate there, but your Patreon is doing quite well from your more or less patron game. How have you found doing that?
Yeah, the patron game has been really fulfilling. And I think the opportunity to offer a game to the players who all have incredible experience in the world of darkness and an incredible depth of knowledge of Werewolf the Apocalypse, to a degree that sometimes they will say things and chapter and verse me, and I'll just nod and say, okay, I believe you. I have to, because they are so well versed in this game and the rules that I am steering a ship rather than having to direct a game. It is much more giving them the opportunity to role play in ways that they are happy and interested in, and providing a little bit of plot so that they feel like they are being given some framing for that. And it has been a very fulfilling game. So I would say from a Patreon perspective, doing that has been fantastic, and really, really, it's been beneficial for when editing the actual episodes has been very tough for me, which has been my biggest struggle. Is doing some of the audio editing has made doing regular episodes daunting for a little bit, and why I took a 2-month break from regular Werewolf podcast episodes to say, hey, I'm just going to try and get my head right. And we will be hopefully recording the next book review episode here in the next couple of weeks. So that will be exciting to get back into the habit of doing.
It really feels like a case of supply meeting demand. Like I remember someone who is in education talking about like the kind of teacher required to run like a gifted program, the tool set required to run a game for new players, and a tool set required to run it for lore heads, I feel is pretty different. As you mentioned, your goal is to kind of put some bumpers on the field and maybe act as a periodic referee. But as you say, the players will frequently tell you things that you're like, oh yeah, that is probably right. Jim, who hath read all things thrice. And which is why also I will never do that. It's also one of those things where it's like, nope, I'm still providing the benefit I said I would to my patrons.
Yeah. And honestly, I recommend it for other people that are interested in running games for these systems that you're like, I'd like to see how that goes, and you have a Patreon. It is an excellent way to utilize your Patreon. And I know there are some other folks that are thinking about offering Mage and some other things like that in the future. So more power to you. And I think it is a fulfilling thing to do.
Here's one for you. And this is kind of a trick question. What is the best homebrew rule you use at your table, or a rule you happenstanced upon reading a billion times, a billion books, and it changed your game for the better? This is from Jenna F.
So I don't use homebrew rules in Mage. So that is the easy answer for you.
I am pretty well there with you. I have tried some small modifications. I don't add rules not there. There are some rules I ignore. And I feel like, so I run a smaller version of Raw as opposed to most of the optional systems I tend to ignore. I do like revised resonance rules, which is kind of the one I draw back. And sometimes you just have to go to a previous system because there just isn't an X20 rule for it. So I consider that still roughly part of it. I have tried adding a preparation mechanic whereby players don't need to say, I brought this and do this ahead of time. And we just kind of roll ahead of time and say, these are the points you have to go for. And you can pull from that pool to say, hey, I do have that ritual component, or hey, I did do this thing ahead of time. That has not turned out as well as I want. It requires players being comfortable with that kind of mechanic, and there are just so few other ones in World of Darkness that it feels out of place, so it never quite gets the pickup. Biggest one also would be the alternate spheres from Traditions Revised. Every time I read the Data Sphere or Primal Utility, I get a better understanding of what I think the authors were going for, and that kind of edges itself into place over time. So for the other spheres, I tend to have a pretty strong idea of how they work, with a few exceptions, but those are the ones where, like, yes, even though I am reading it a third and fourth time, I still feel as if I'm dialing it in. Partially because it was a big idea and they didn't have a lot of word count to get it across, and two, because it is kind of abstract in a lot of those cases. Like, is void correspondence a separate sphere? I don't know. It doesn't really answer it, and I could really see it going both ways. I guess the other thing I do that is kind of a homebrew that I kind of stole from D&D is I'm way more generous with XP. As an adult, I'm generally playing once a month in a relatively long session where we try and get a lot done, where we use a lot of the tools from Vampire to be like, hey, we could role play out all the intrigue that happens at this party, but your kid needs to go to bed by 10. So to keep this moving, we're going to do this, this, and this. And even to the point where at the start of a session, we will say, okay, this happened since our last session. Describe how it happened to me. So to keep things moving, I tend to be generous with XP. And I generally do advancement by saying, hey, what's the next thing you want? And then we say, and someone will say, okay, I want another dot of matter. And I'll say, okay, how about in 2 more sessions, plus you write me up a brief scene where you talk with a matter mentor or explain how you got it, or we can do that over text or something like that. That tends to be the other big thing that I add to it.
Yeah, I'm also very generous with my XP, particularly in my patron game, where they are now at, I believe, 50 some odd XP, technically over a 3-week period in game, but a period of over a year playing, so, and we've done blue booking stuff on Discord and things like in the interim between the actual physical sessions. And I'm like, you deserve XP so that you feel like you are advancing your characters in a way that is interesting to you. And the plot that I have you doing is incredibly world earth shattering sort of thing. You should feel like you are becoming badasses, and I want you to do that.
And one of the things I learned from Invisible Sun is some players always want something new to fiddle around with, and I happen to be one of those, so I am pretty comfortable with it. In fact, if all goes well, I will be doing an episode on like theories of experience points and how to apply them to Mage in the future at some point. So I have a vague outline for that.
So Pukagar asks, what's the most important and/or engaging tidbit of lore in the game line you've learned or forgot but rediscovered over the course of reading the books for your reviews?
For me, I am constantly amazed at things that weren't rules. I did not realize that Revised did not have a strict one-to-one correspondence between focuses and spheres. It's a single throwaway sentence that's like, this is just a guideline. Similarly, there's a throwaway sentence that says, oh yeah, your difficulty increases by 1 for each 2 running effects you have at any given time. This is separate from the domino effect. But lore-wise, the forgotten one for me are the progenitor hyperdolphins. that you have like these 9 intelligence 7 cetaceans running around that can discern the true name of God is pretty great. And I constantly misremember the lore regarding the psychopomps and the various interpretations of that, and why Chiron Mustai was being all Chironic and so on, and the idea that like the Night of Fauna was a moment of entelechy where the future reached to the past and shattered, and that broke the world of darkness in some interesting way. Just that interpretation that there is something weird and big out there is something I very much like about Revised, and it helps justify to me the idea that avatars are weird and alien. I am fine if players want a scrutable avatar that is kind of like Jiminy Cricket or something like that. I find it more interesting if mages aren't quite sure what's going on, but we've all just kind of grown comfortable with it because we need it to magic. Is there anything in your year of reading that you've rediscovered and been like, huh?
One of the things that I like is that there are more elements of minor crossover than I realize in the books, where there's just little references to things like the Giovanni in Las Vegas being a thing. You get that in that Las Vegas book for Mage, but it's referenced very, very lightly in Vampire itself. So that's an opportunity for you to be like, oh, here's something outside of my line that I can drag this whole story into and build an entire game off of.
Oh, yeah. Like in the Red Sign has some of the most development of the technocracy history that exists, where it's like, oh, yeah, there were 6 attempts during the Cold War to do this, that, the other thing. And I'm like, what? And it's just the weird to the degree to which you hand a vampire writer literally anything. They're like, well, I should probably come up with 6 or 7 characters that each have individual motivations that connect to 2 other characters and 2 organizations that would give them clear forward momentum. Dum-de-dum-de-dum. Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And you're like, how do they do that? They just write things. So yeah, I'm there for you. The light elements of crossover that I never realized were there. Pukagar also asks, in what ways do you think the last year you have developed your skills overall as podcasters?
Taking notes is great.
While you're going or during editing?
Prior to editing. So while I'm reading or while I'm recording an episode, having notes that I can read off of and go, this is something to remind me about X, Y, and Z. I wasn't doing that necessarily very well with Werewolf, where I was just reading the book and then skimming through it as I was reviewing it. Doing extensive notes for Opcast has been great because it means that I can dial in and understand exactly how much time I'm going to spend on a thing and an idea and roll with that. It's been very nice.
I think for me, I also have outlined more. My interviews and such have gotten more scripted. Part of that is the fact that if I only ever had one on my plate at a time, I could probably get away with fewer notes. But the fact that interviews are kind of feast or famine, I will look at the outstanding episode catalog and I will say, hey, how many do I have in storage? It's running low. I should reach out to 6 or 7 people because not everyone is going to have a good schedule, and then try and record those and then kind of release those as a batch that, again, are doled out on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So outlining has become much more important to me, and that is something I actually learned basically from Monica, to find out that bonus experience, which sounds like a wildly improvisational and loose show, to say that is the energy and vibe they bring to it, not to say that they are disorganized. Like, to see how many of their jokes that are actually scripted or they thought of ahead of time, I'm like, oh, son of a gun. I've also biased myself towards guests that are easier to edit. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to talk to this person, this person, and this person. And generally guests are better the second time they're on because they are more comfortable with it. They have an idea of what your interview style is. Maybe they heard what your output is and they understand that in a lot of cases, a lot of people don't realize when I say I edit things, what that means, and that makes them nervous, which makes their audio worse. So the fact that I edit makes it easier, often puts the guest more at comfort and makes it easier for me to edit. So I love that as a kind of a positive feedback loop. I've tried to get better at how I ask questions. Like, often you can hear someone trying to figure out how to answer a question in the process of answering the question. Like, they have an idea, they're just not quite sure how to enumerate it. So it will frequently be the case that after that, if I think I've figured out their point, I will try and ask a follow-up question, mostly for the purpose of stating their point more succinctly. That way, during the editing process, I can cut down their process of trying to hone in on an answer. So it is still in tape, and the speaker still gets to say, this is the cool, insightful thing I got, but it lets me trim episodes. I've generally gotten more aggressive with trying to figure out what the core of an episode is and try to point as many of the questions at that as I reasonably can. And I think the worst episodes I do are the ones where I thought the core of the conversation was going to be one place, but it wound up being another. And I've gotten more comfortable cutting out what under other circumstances would be good audio, but doesn't actually point at that key topic. The other part of this was, what advice would you give to other podcasters? If someone were to try to get into specifically World of Darkness podcasting at this point, I would say it's always good to have two voices. It's really hard to do a one mic episode, I think. Some people are good at it. I am not. My voice gets tired after about 20 minutes, and I just sound super monotonous. Try and find a good place to record that doesn't have a lot of background noise. I would rather someone have a mediocre microphone with good sound quality otherwise than a great microphone in, say, for instance, an echoey room, or if the microphone is too sensitive, it's very obvious when their face moves away from it. There's a lot of free tools out there to get started. I will probably do an episode on this at some point, but to me, kind of the key is go in knowing what you want the audience to take away from it. It's really good to say, is this a running concern? Is this just best practices when running a game? A open-ended show that is centered around a personality is not something that in the old World of Darkness people have really figured out, in my opinion, except for maybe Pathcast. I am fine with that. So that would be kind of my initial advice. I'll probably do a call-a-thon episode where I just say, hey, this is how we do everything. Josh, any advice to anyone who wanted to get started in podcasting?
Yeah, record a bunch of episodes ahead of time. One of the things that is really detrimental to a long-term success of your podcast is doing it on the fly every week, where you're like, I'm going to record and then produce this episode. That is not a great way to have episodes regularly come out. Create a backlog, work forward on a regular basis, and you will set yourself up for success more strongly by doing that. It's really just something that I recommend wholeheartedly, is have some in the can and stick with that. And if you need to reduce your release schedule to keep some in the can, I actually think that is better than having no episodes ready. So that's one of the things that I would suggest doing.
Do you look at podcast metrics of where your listeners come from? Because right now, about 45% of our listeners are outside the US. And to me, that is either people that are expats or where English is a second language. And to me, the important part is once you know that, a lot of things like sarcasm and irony, to me, kind of go out the door, just because that's really hard for non-native speakers. And I'd say that's another thing that kind of has influenced my style. Do you have any idea where werewolf listeners are coming from? And has that consideration modified anything for you?
Yeah, I would say we get most of our listeners from the United States, but it is a slim majority. It's probably in the 60% United States, Canada versus the rest of the world. And so we get a sizable percentage of people from around the world that are listening to those episodes. And I struggle with trying to make sure that when I'm critiquing things from a US lens, that is giving an opportunity for someone from outside the United States to understand and really respect where I'm coming from with a particular topic. And I apologize to listeners if they are completely lost on why something is a problem. And it's because it's something that may be a little bit too US centric. So every night, K-Night asks, what is one takeaway you had from this year that you didn't expect to gain and was still very profound?
I guess I'm going to get real for a moment. I am an actuary by trade, and in my spare time, I like doing presentations on catastrophes. And at first, whenever a pandemic starts, I am generally angry at the disease because I don't want to blame the victim. Like, the elderly and the infirmed are the first to suffer, and then it establishes stakes, and society will hopefully rally. And then from there on, it is a fair fight to me, unless it's something like a hemorrhagic fever or something with like stupid high mortality and transmissibility or something. The current pandemic kind of showed me who we are, and in many cases that was sobering. I am, at the end of the day, an institutionalist. I tend to think that institutions and social structures are the best ways to transmit value across generations. I mean, the other ways you could do that would be with art or some cultural work. But for me, civic institutions tends to be the way to go. And now I'm very much in a place of saying, so where should I be putting my effort? And the answer is, I don't know. I lived my life in a certain way up until now, thinking that cultural value and understanding would be propagated in a certain way. I am now questioning that. and I need to figure out what I want to do next. The term the Euthanatoi use is quamatha, to be at a crossroad, and I think I am at one of those, and I did not expect that to happen to me at the age of 37. And of the changes that happened to me this year, on the plus side, I am constantly amazed at people's ability to generate what they consider to be meaningful activities, even under situations of duress. I am very pleased that as much cultural and artistic output still occurred even under our current times. Josh, how about you?
Well, I don't think I have anything as profound as that, but I will say this: mental health is incredibly important, and ensuring that your mental health is top of mind, as it were, is incredibly important to ensuring that you are capable of striving forward into these challenges that we face. I think we are challenged as a society right now in multiple ways. And if we are not protecting ourselves and ensuring that we are mentally capable and ready to walk into those challenges, then we will struggle more as a society, because we will not be bringing our best selves to the fight, as it were. So if you need time, take that time, whatever that time is, but don't be afraid to self-care productively if that is something that is going to be better for you as well. So produce art if it is helpful for you to do so, and don't feel burdened by it either. So take a break if you need to, find that balance. And I think I get that just from my experiences podcasting and knowing, hey, you need to take a break, and having done so. And that was very healthy and good.
It's very hard to ride the line between doing this activity helps give purpose and organization to my life, and doing this activity too much takes away time from the other things that the energy that this activity generates allows me to do. It is very hard to ride that line, and it feels like bowling. It is very it is very hard to avoid both of those gutters, or the Scylla and Charybdis of burnout and inaction. So my name's Josh, and I don't have anything profound to say except for that profound thing I just said. And next he said, what house rule did you make up, or just to find it later as a set rule in another rulebook or version? Has that ever happened to you? Has that happened in any of your werewolf games?
Yeah, there have been a couple of times where I've been like, oh, this specific thing to do with ones, like ones don't take away from damage dice. I thought that was a house rule for ages. And then my players were like, yeah, ones don't take away from successes and damage rolls. And I was like, great. I'm glad I've been running that the right way for years. There are things like that I think maybe this is a house rule or homebrew, and it turns out no, it's just a rule from a previous edition, or a rule that you read and just embedded in your brain.
Yeah. For me, the Storyteller Guide is like, make seekings free, which I use frequently, and I thought was a Terry Robinson innovation. I also tend to use cinematic damage when keeping track of groups. Later did I find that was a well-established thing in Tales of Magic Dark Adventure. Cinematic damage is basically you break down combat into how many hits a person can take, which is any attack that deals X or more damage. In some cases, it makes it easier to deal with large groups of people, but also makes it so that one key shot doesn't kill your characters. So, yeah. Next question.
Fantastic. So Forager asks, what sort of tools would you like to see developed to help Mage continue to be successful in the future? Community or publisher developed, it doesn't matter. Tools meant broadly here. They could be Storyteller's Vault products, useful at the table, LARP helpers, digital tools, or anything really. Just thoughts on how everyone might help out Mage.
I still think that we need a Chronicle book to show someone soup to nuts how a game can be run. I think a Mage Chronicle book is harder than for other lines, but not as hard as people say it is. This is a case of put up or shut up for me. This is something I need to do if I'm going to prove my point. I think we need better rules references. I think the M20 Quick Start is actually pretty great in that regard, and something a little bit bigger that contained most of the rules I think would really get us there. An ST-facing book on how to mage and how to deal with common problems that arise at tables I think would be useful. As far as apps and other things, I would love a random resonance generator or something like that. A whole bunch of oddities that you can just add to an effect to make it look weird that a storyteller could have that show that magic is tough to control, and maybe a little bit Sorcerer's Apprentice where you're dealing with something that you don't quite have control, as well as a here are my spheres, what can I do app that would automatically generate kind of a spell book for a player as a starting point, maybe with notes to say this makes sense in this paradigm and this makes sense in that paradigm. But that, and I will always take more STV, Paradigms Explored books, and more location books. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I second the location and more paradigm explored books because I think those are really useful for people. Location books just allow you to pick up something and set a game in it, or even just steal ideas from it and go, I'm going to set my game using these elements from this awesome book. Mm-hmm. And Paradigm Explored allows you to really understand how you build a mage character. And I think Shape and Number is a fantastic example of something that I would never understand how to make. But now that I've read it, I can create a character that is a mathematician and feel like I at least have a reference to understand how to present this NPC or this character in a way that will not seem completely out of the blue or off the wall.
Yeah. Sorry, it is Number and Shape. My mistake. Paradigm Explored, Number and Shape. And yeah, it is frustrating because there are some books that deliver a small amount of value to a lot of people, and there are other books that deliver a lot of value to a small number of people. And I feel like the Paradigm Explored books are in that latter category where it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, this is a short book, but I should be able to charge twice as much because of how much someone using it is going to get out of it. So I'm not sure how we make the economics of those books work, because every one of that style, it kind of has to be a labor of love at this point. So maybe we crack that nut at some point.
There's one other thing that I want to exist, and I don't think it will ever exist, or it will exist eventually, and that is a LARP resolution app for your phone. I want a new version of Parlor LARP that has an app built into the game from the beginning. Because I think right now we don't have effective resolution mechanics for high mechanics Parlor LARPing. And rock, paper, scissors is not super effective. And I think negotiated mechanics work really well for a Nordic style of game, but some folks don't enjoy that style of negotiated play. And having a built-in app from the very beginning would make that go away. And I don't know if we will see that anytime soon, but if we can have a LARP group that creates that when we're post-pandemic, I think that would be amazing to see.
I would also be fascinated to see something that was NFC, near field communication, yes, NFC based, where everyone would get an NFC chip. And that way, when I come up to Josh's character, I would get a little prompt on my phone that says, this is Josh. This is a thing that you can't bring up with them. This is a line or a veil. Also, this is their character, and this is what you know about them ahead of time. And I think the technology is there to do it, and it doesn't seem too complicated, but that's one of those things where that could either be trivial and no one's done it yet, or like the person who figures that out will be starting the next billion-dollar company or something like that. But yeah, there are a lot of LARP tools, and hopefully one day I will eventually get to LARP and find out if any of my ideas actually make sense.
Sieg, I believe, Sieg asks, is the real Ascension just the friends we killed along the way?
My answer is no. I've never had a murder hobo group, but maybe that's why no one I know has ever ascended. Do you have any thoughts on that, or just next question?
Just go on to the next question.
Okay.
So, from Lucid asks, of the many fan base opinions that have been widely spread around, was there any you were most surprised about to either be true or untrue?
I heard early rumors that Hunter was and then wasn't going to be doing Werewolf, and I'm like, no, why would they take it away? And then when they brought that back in-house, seemingly, was that even ever formally announced that Hunter wasn't doing it anymore? Am I violating NDAs right now?
It is an awkward situation where it happened that they brought it back in the house. They stated it was being brought back in house, but not that Hunter was not going to be involved any longer.
Okay, there we go. But yeah, I was surprised as heck for that. But then at the same time, they had Renegade doing V5 stuff, which felt super weird because I thought Renegade was the board game and publishing side and Hunter was the writing side. So that whole thing was kind of weird. And I was surprised when that turned out to be the case because it just didn't make sense. The other thing is I really thought the door was closed on Mage until I got poked to be like, hey, Terry, you want to write on Lore of the Traditions? And I'm like, oh, what STV supplement is that going to be? And they're like, no, it's going to be official. I'm like, thank you. And that's terrifying. So that was, I thought the door was closed on Mage, and it turned out it wasn't, not by a long shot. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, the opportunity to have other X20 books appear over the last year to 2 years has been really awesome. So I'm just going to say that like Apocalyptic Record existing is amazing to me. These mage books that are coming out are going to be amazing if you ask me. So I'm very excited about that. I'm surprised that the Sabbat book is disliked. I'll touch on that hot topic. Like, I think that is surprising to me. It's not surprising that they went for a first edition feel for the Sabbat when saying that they're only an antagonist, because that was one of the initial things that they were trying to get to, is the Anarchs and the Camarilla are the core elements of the game, and the Sabbat are just intense antagonists that you can use in your stories. But I'm surprised there has been lots of negativity around that. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm still surprised by it.
It has been interesting to me to see the vampire community find out that there are other ways to do revisions. Like, for instance, between revisions of Exalted, things just change. There is no diegetic reason. It is still 5 years since the Empress disappeared, and just cosmologically things will change. The nature of the dragon-blooded or the power level of the Solars will just change with no explanation. That kind of change more or less happened in V5, where things just shifted. I don't recall that happening in Vampire before, and I wish they had kind of given more hand signals to say, hey, we're changing stuff in this particular way, and maybe even a why. I am surprised at the amount of vitriol it has generated, but also at the same time, I am surprised that defenders of it do not understand where that vitriol is coming from. But that's a different game, and I look forward to having this discussion when V5 is out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Next question.
So Crash asks, if you could remove and or add one snippet from the Mage canon, what would it be and why?
The stupidest statement that arguably exists in Mage is the line in Horizon Stronghold of Hope where you can get a pawn of tasks for $5. It destroys everything all the time. There are a bunch of weird technocracy mentions that are kind of wild. Over time, I have gotten more comfortable with some of the more out there stuff, just because they make the world of Mage fun and different, and if you have more kooky things in the canon, that makes the kooky things your characters are likely to do more in theme. But yeah, that thing in Horizon Stronghold of Hope, or as I called it in one episode, Horizon Stronghold of Coke, is probably the one that's like, to me. Do you have any single lines that you wish you could just excise from the lore that are personally annoying? I know they've made missteps regarding culture and so on, but
it's hard to find a small enough thing to remove, because the thing that I would remove is a big thing, and that is there are two things that come to mind, and one is Prime. I would just remove Prime because I think it is seems like a default mage skill. You should just do that if you are a mage. You should have everything that Prime does just built into you. And the other thing is the idea of avatars as something alien to you. I don't like that. And that is totally a personal thing. And I understand that people can create characters that believe their avatar is a completely alien thing from them. And I think that belief in that is an okay thing, but having it written in the line that they are these separate entities, that to me, it was like, I don't like that you are establishing that, even though it's established throughout the game.
yeah, and it's a thing that happened, the formalization of that happened very late in Revised. Like, that was a Bill Bridges thing, and was only kind of dimly hinted at before that as one of the options. It's one of those things where when Revised says, like, yeah, your avatar is a kind of semi-conscious Prime stuff, like, there's no other answer you can give that makes everyone satisfied, so you have to pick the version of getting just a cheeseburger. You have to kind of pick this relatively bland thing so that it fits with everything. Anything mind-blowing would make everyone look like an idiot. Buck asks, how has the Mage community changed between the beginning and end of the year? What trend do you think will continue? What surprised you about how people are engaging or not engaging with Mage? Josh, you too are involved in a number of Mage communities. Is there anything that you've noticed over the course of the year? Josh is one of the moderators for the White Wolf Onyx Path World of Darkness Onyx Path media group, which is probably the largest single clearinghouse of World of Darkness content out there in terms of actual plays and so on. Is there anything you've noticed over your time kind of moderating that?
I've noticed it's pretty steady with the amount of Mage actual plays that are being produced, where there's usually one at a time that is being produced. And occasionally one or two will overlap for a short period of time. But I see that as very interesting. Like, there are a million V5 actual plays being produced, and I think that's fantastic. but people are a little bit more careful with, I'm going to run a mage game and these are the ideas I'm going to bring to the table. And I think it's interesting to note that few of them use the rules as written, and usually tend to be more storytelling focused rather than very heavily mechanically focused. And I would like to see an actual play that is utilizing the mechanics as written and still producing a good story. I don't know if that's possible. I think it is, but it is one of those things that I would like to see a little bit more of, is someone saying, we can run this rules as written and produce an interesting and engaging and entertaining story.
And by entertaining story, you don't mean that people can't get that at their table, but a story that is compelling for an actual play, which tends to be a little bit different in terms of form. But yeah, I noticed that too. There are a lot of people who run an arc of mage, where there are people who run Chronicles of Vampire, and there are any number of those where they're in season 5 and their characters are now 4th generation combat wombats or something like that. For me, I am amazed at the number of first-timers that we are still getting, and over time, the number of people who join the Discord, where I'm like, what's your favorite group in Mage? And they're like, I don't know any. And I'm like, this is terrifying, but thank you and welcome. I really think that I am amazed that there are still as many people as they are who are new to Mage, and that is an opportunity for us. And each day that we don't have those tools in place to take them from I'm curious about this to I'm running it at my table, we're missing an opportunity, and I hope we find ways of filling it out. I'm amazed at the number of Mage live plays that are happening. As Josh mentioned, the fact that there's always one going. Now, there are people that have done long-running ones. Shout out to our friends at Golden Age Stories doing Technogate. The other thing that surprises me are the number of very basic questions that I see, where people are like, either the rule, which suggests that they either haven't touched the book or the books are laid out so poorly that they don't get an answer to it. So that is another opportunity for me. I'm thrilled on the Mates of the Podcast side that I didn't think our listenership would continue growing, and I didn't think our Discord would continue growing. I thought we had kind of tapped it out. Our rate of increase in listenership has certainly dropped from like the meteoric rise we had in the first 2 years. But yeah, episodes, what an episode is getting per week now is comparatively higher than at the start of the year. And that surprised me, especially as we go through what I'll consider a lot of the quote unquote obvious topics. The fact that people are interested in aliens in the world of darkness pleases me to no end.
Yeah, so Randane asks, reverse of the house rule question. Instead of adding a rule, are there any rules you tend not to bring into your own games?
I don't use structure and durability. They make sense diegetically. Like when you're trying to figure out, can I crash a car through a wall? They're great there, but it really stunts magic. Structure and durability basically says you need this many successes. Your roll needs to have at least this many successes to affect something, and then you need so many successes to make it stop working. And this is useful because it answers questions like, as I say, how fast does my car need to go through a concrete wall? And there it actually kind of works surprisingly well. But to me, it really gives up the ghost when you're like, okay, the one game Werewolf where you have people with strength of 9 throwing like cars through walls doesn't use structure and durability rules. It makes matter really hard to use because it also sets that as a minimum number of successes. So like, I want characters to be able to make it through a steel bank vault door pretty easily with matter. Like that's how the guy with matter gets to look really cool. So I tend not to use that. I always make it easier to get to the underworld. I never require entropy 4. It's just another form of stepping sideways to me. I also make it real easy to dream your way into the astral or what have you. You don't necessarily always get to bring your spheres with you, but I want characters to almost always be able to wander around the Vulgate at minimum. So I tend to drop those. And I generally remove the rules for drugs because, as we know, cocaine is overpowered. Is there anything you tend not to bring to your table, Josh?
I think I agree with you about stepping into the Dark Umbra in particular. That's something I usually let someone do with spirit and a lower level of spirit than what the game, how do you do that, or one of those other supplements might tell you to do. If someone has a good paradigmatic reason for something working at a lower sphere rating, I am much more comfortable with that than saying the spheres say you can only do this at this level. I think paradigm trumps all of that. I think that's the point of the game. I will go out on a limb and say, if you can argue something through your paradigm as being more likely at a lower level, then it should be.
Yeah, I try and Assuming the paradigm holds together, I'm always afraid of the paradigm of I'm awesome at everything all the time. But if it's your game, you can cut that off at the pass. But yeah, that is something I certainly waffle about. And since I'm doing one-shots, it is something I very much go back and forth on. And last question, also from Randane, favorite Storyteller's Vault supplements, especially new ones for this year. Josh, you've been involved in a lot, and you tend to keep a better track of it than me. Were there any in particular that caught your eye?
I have been really bad this year about reading Storyteller's Vault supplements. I haven't had the time to read them or go through them as much as I would like to. So sadly, I have to say, I don't know.
What do you have on your to-read list, if I may?
Let me bring up my list. And in the meantime, Terry, can you talk about yours?
Okay. Again, Paradigm Explored, Number and Shape. Just watching another author go through the process of going from this is how I think the universe works to this is how magic comes out the other end of it. The more cases we have of that, I think the better the world of Mage becomes. To me, that is the key question of the game, and almost everything builds off of that. I also thought The Hipster's Guide to the Traditions was a pretty great first entry by Robbie. It has a lot of really neat stuff in it. I think it's a little pricey for what it has to offer, but if you're a person who just wants more systems, the fact that it blends good art, good little bits of fiction, and good and interesting new systems. It comes up with something where each tradition gets something that's not quite a lore sheet. And now that V5 is on the vault, we can come up with traditions lore sheets, and that is something I would like to do, and I may cut this from the final episode so no one scoops me on it. The sheer flood of stuff that has come out for V5 is kind of exciting, and a lot of those are not short publications. Very much on my to-read list are the first Team Dossier. The first Team Dossiers are basically when Pentex wants to come mess you up, rather than going for the big guns necessarily, they will send the medium guns towards you, which are groups that give them plausible deniability. Clinton Boomer, the author of these, is well known in other role-playing circles, and I'm really curious to see what someone with a lot of experience outside of WAD brings to it in terms of thing. World of Darkness Central Florida is a full book. Yeah, it clocks in at more than 100 pages, and it's kind of the first generic World of Darkness book that we've gotten in a while. Otherwise, there are some people that are doing absolutely gorgeous work. Kelly Black is, I think that's the author's name, has done just an absolute sheer volume of what appear to be gorgeous things. I haven't cracked them open yet, but it is nice to see people with that kind of design chops come to bear on the Storyteller Vault. In addition to that, we got the Emperor's New Coat. We've got Florida Spirit Patrons. This Never Real Worlds, which is on Paradox Realms and is like 80 pages, I'm curious to crack open. And also Philadelphia by Night, which is just this 180-page historical setting for the city I'm in. So yeah, I have a pretty lengthy to-read list. How about you, Josh?
Philadelphia by Night was the one that I was going to specifically call out as on my actual to-read list, as in that I will sit down and read it at some point soon, because that book is well graphically designed and incredibly well written. I worked with the author on one of the Vampire Jam games for the Vampire Jam that just happened, and their writing and speed at writing is really impressive to me. I have been able to write that quickly before, but not in a while, and it's really nice to see someone that motivated and excited, and I'm positive that their book is going to be good. I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm also interested in the Vampire Wheelchair, which is a supplement that came out that takes this idea of disability and using disability aids and saying, how can I use these in my games, in my vampire games? And I haven't cracked that book open to see how they thread that needle of talking about these topics in a way that is interesting and respectful. And I'm sure it will be, considering who has written it. But it's just one of those things that I think will be interesting to delve into. And there's a lot of Vampire 5th edition products out there. And it is good to see so many art elements as well. The Darkscapes from Andrea Payne are really, really good art that I am utilizing in my books. And I think people should find those and grab them and use them, because it's great art that you can utilize in your Storyteller's Vault supplements, mostly vampire, but you could find other uses for them as well.
The V5 stuff, there was a lot of quick starts and Chronicle seeds and so on that came out, but now with a little bit more time, we're seeing some full books make it out into the world. And I hope there proves to be a market to have that continue And I hope we find better ways to surface things that we really like. The V5 OneNote template is something that is very curious to me. I'm a OneNote fan. I use it for organizing all my things. And the idea of people doing accessory files and documents that can help with that, I'm pretty excited to see. We've talked a lot. Josh, any other thoughts before we close out 2021?
I think folks should go out and play Mage. If you have not had a chance to do so yet, that is the thing that we really encourage in this community for you to go out and do, is find an opportunity to play the game, run the game, and talk about the game. You can read it all day long, but actually having the opportunity to play it is really worth it. And if you are a storyteller that is like, I'm nervous about doing this, trust me, you can run the game and it will be fun for those people that are playing. You have the opportunity to be someone's gateway into this amazing game. Be that person.
I fully agree with what Josh said. At the end, it's fun to read about, and maybe disproportionately to other games, we get something out of just reading about it, but there is something magical, pardon the pun, that happens when you get to sit around and play. And I think there are enough people that are sufficiently desirous of it that we can accommodate a wide notion of what a mage game is. We can have that gonzo adventure, and we can have my game where there are 6 mages in all of Philadelphia. And there's certainly space for both. And I hope over the next year we are able to come up with tools to help people with that. And with that, Josh, if people are interested in what you're up to otherwise, where can they follow you?
You can follow me at Podcast Werewolf if you're interested in Werewolf the Podcast and me pontificating about the horrors of Werewolf the Apocalypse and why it's a social justice nightmare. You can do so there. You can also listen to me at Opcast, where I talk specifically about the Trinity Continuum with Chaz and Scott. And that is less SJW talk and much more excitement about the books because they don't have as many issues as the werewolf books do in that regard.
And periodically, you can also hear Josh on RPGnomics, our ongoing investigation of how the industry works for Pain in the Dice. Josh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry.
I did a more extensive year interview with Chaz K of The Story Told and Monica Speck of Bonus Experience for Pain in the Dice, and I'll share that out when I'm done editing it with a more granular look at the things we did this year. This has been Mage the Podcast, where we hope if you're the kind of person who makes resolutions, you have reasonable success with them in 2022. Our show is made possible by our executive producers, who are Alex, Anders S., Anon, Berto, Boo, Boogers, Brad of the Blue, Bryce Perry, Dan Svensson, Dennis Osborne, Elliot Osborne, Gargle Noir, George Lara, Guy Conan Stewart, La Bull, Isabel Castillo, Jason Kennedy, Jason Vines, Jason W. Biggs, Jeff Bryn, Jenna F., John Magnuson, Josh H., Joshua Heath, Carl Halperin, Leslie Weatherstone, Michael Prohl, Michael Creedle, Michael Parker, Nibero, Neil Patterson, Nikita Klamenov, Oliver Schindler, Patrick Mulder, Ralph Scheinhammer, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Rob H., Ryan Hilton, Ryan Kendi, Samuel Tobin, Stephen Carton, Thrice Great, William Connolly, William Martin, and W. Starter. Thank you to Oracle supporter Jay Widener, Oracle of B-roll that's obviously a different resolution and color space than the name film, Oracle Buck Farmer, Oracle of second units who are just trying their best, darn it, and Oracle supporter Christopher Phillips, Oracle of films that take place in a major U.S. city but were just filmed in Vancouver because it's way cheaper, often cleaner, and kind of just close enough. Our executive producer shout-out is to Leslie Weatherstone. When I think Leslie, I think looking forward, because both begin with the letter L. What can we expect in the year 2022? Well, the UN declared 2022 as the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries, Aquaculture, International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development, the International Year of Sustainable Mountain Development, and the International Year of Glass. Additionally, if Queen Elizabeth II makes it to February 6th, she'll hit her Platinum Jubilee as 70 years on the throne, something no British monarch has previously done. And finally, the Dark Energy Space Probe Euclid will be launched by the ESA, hopefully. Thanks for the support. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on Twitter. We have a hop in Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. Now go change reality. Bye.